Got a submission here from Surgikill, who just wants some general tuning advice on her PIDs. Here are your PIDs right here. I'm going to set those aside. Everybody can take a look at them, and then we'll set them aside. I wish you'd told me what copter you were using, because if you've got an H quad or an X quad, like with a standard body, then the roll and the pitch shouldn't be the same. The pitch will generally be higher than the roll. On the other hand, if you were using a custom mixer, they would be more similar. And if you were using a pure X quad like a Krieger or a Mitsuko or something, then maybe they should be the same. Not knowing any of that, a little hard for me to judge those. So again, folks, if you're going to do a submission, make the best of it. Tell me what you're flying. Give me a command line dump, etc. But let's in the spirit of make the best of it, let's see what we can make of these logs. Now you actually gave me a couple of logs. You gave me 3 logs, and I picked this one because it's the longest and it has the most interesting flight in it. And the first thing I did was I got your gyro traces. I zoomed out to 10%. I looked at how noisy they were. You have very thin lines, so things are pretty good there. You don't have an excessive amount of noise. Your filtering is not inadequate at least. Now something's going on here, so let's go ahead and zoom in. And let's take a look. And I'm looking at the roll axis first because the roll axis usually has more activity going on there than the pitch axis, depending on the layout of the copter. The first thing I want to point out is that when you first arm the copter, we get a lot of noise in the D term. That's not anything to be concerned about. When the throttle is low, it's normal to get some lower frequency components. They're still relatively high frequency, but they get through the D term filter, and you see this super noise. And then as soon as you start to throttle up, things settle down and get okay. You had something crazy go on here. I wonder if maybe you didn't get a solid takeoff and you bumped the ground. We're not going to worry too much about that. I don't think that's indicative of anything. So we'll move on to this point where your throttle is clearly up and you're clearly flying. Now we do see some oscillation in the P term. Surging maybe is a better word for it. I wouldn't say it's to the point of oscillation. Notice that it is not crossing the 0 axis. So an oscillation is almost, a P term oscillation is almost always going to cross the 0 axis and be both directions. Whereas here we can see a little bit of surging, but not what I would call hard oscillations. The D term looks a little more active than I would probably like to see here. The D term is larger in magnitude than the P term, which I usually don't like to see, maybe until I'm sure that the P term is correct. We're not seeing a huge amount of noise in the D term. No very narrow, jagged spikes. As we continue forward, here the throttle's low again, and we start to get that D term noise come through. Again, because the throttle's low, it's nothing to worry about. Again, the D term looks more active than the P term by far here. Look at the magnitude here of these jumps, right? The D term magnitude is much bigger than the P term magnitude. We usually don't want to see that. So it feels to me like you've got a mismatch between your D and your P term. Your P term feels like it might be a little low. Let's go look at a high throttle scenario. Aha! Oh, wait. See? Yeah, okay. So I was going to say your P term feels like it might be a little low because we very seldom see any sort of surging. Now, it's hard to judge without a camera to know. Maybe you're just doing some very sedate flying and it's not bringing out the worst of the P term. But it feels a little low based on the flying you're doing anyway. And as you raise the throttle now, things get really crazy. We get a lot of oscillation. And what's happening here is that D term, which I said was a little too high, is now just going over the edge and just making garbage out of everything. So you can see that if you look carefully, the P term is going up and down here. But with the D term being just so crazy out of control, it's hard to judge whether that it doesn't really tell us anything about our P gain. It tells us that our D gain is too high. So, yeah. So what I would suggest you do is you go to my thread Mini quad PID tuning from start to finish is the name of the thread, and you work through those procedures because what you'll see there is that you want to start with the D gain low, like 3 or 5, and then you want to tune your P term up, your P gain up, until you start to see oscillation, you start to see activity, maybe to the point where you see oscillation and back it down. Although if you're looking in Blackbox, you'll start to see the P term beginning to surge and become active before you actually get oscillations. And then once you've got your P terms right, you can work your D terms up. So that's the procedure I would suggest for you. Yeah, right now you can see that as soon as you raise the throttle, the D term just flips out, and then it's really impossible to tell if your P gain is exactly right or not. Okay, so I think a little bit back to basics. If you haven't followed that procedure, go ahead and follow the procedure that I outlined in that thread. Hope that was helpful. Happy flying.